Okay, so while the two, just kind of give me heads up as to when the two people are coming. Hi, hi there.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Let me see if I can get some better sound here.
Okay. And while you're checking in on the sound, I'm going to open up another homepage because I'm going to kind of toggle back and forth.
Yeah. I think that's pretty good. Can you all hear that? Okay. So, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. So we just need, I think, one more person.
Okay.
So we'll be ready in just a minute.
That's fine. Take your time. Because that way I will set up my screen so I don't have to go back and forth. So this is where I'm at right now. Of course, there aren't any trees that are, you know, out. But I'm in kind of the back. So this is the front, and my office right now, it's kind of behind. So right there going to the back.
That looks lovely, though.
And while we're waiting, I can introduce you all to my colleagues. So we're a very small organization with only 12 people. And they're all listed here. And she's the boss. This is Dr. Carol Ember. And the mastermind behind the structure of the database. Fran is the one who is putting together this really, I think, beautiful homepage, which has some cool pictures, which I really like. And let's see what else. Let me introduce you to Trish. She's the person in the adjacent office, and she's the one who collects all the materials for our databases. And Tef is from Ethiopia. He's an anthropologist, PhD in anthropology, and he is one of the what we call the indexers or analysts who work with the materials. This is Sarah. She does the analyzing for the archaeology or the past cultures. And Leon, he kind of oversees what goes into the database as well. And she's the bean counter. That's Marilyn, our accountant. And this is not Jesus, but he helps or is a programmer. His name is Matt. Since then, he has now short hair and I don't know, still a beard, yes. Maureen is the person who helps me, and without her, I would be lost. And this is Ian. He has a PhD in anthropology and a degree from the Divinity School at Yale. So there are jobs for anthropologists, believe it or not. And that's me. And what I do is mostly training. And this is something I really, really like because I can put my anthropology degree from the University of Wyoming, actually High Plains Archaeology, I can put that to use, or I have put it to use. And because my background is in archaeology, I kind of can flip-flop from one discipline to another, which is a little bit harder, I think, for those who are more cultural anthropologists. But that's just my notion. And let's see, who is anthropology here? Well, it's Tef. Not Trish, but Fran. Sarah, she's an archaeologist. Doug has a anthropology background. Leon has an archaeology MA. Carol, she has published many books. And then Matt. So he did his undergraduate degree in anthropology and had a background in computer science, which is a very good combination. And then Ethan, his area of specialty was or is Taiwan and China. So did the last person arrive?
I think she might be stuck in traffic, so let's go ahead and start, Chris.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, so I introduce you to my colleagues, and just to give you a little bit of information about who we are a nonprofit at Yale University in New Haven, and although we are at Yale, we are not funded by Yale. That means that it's our memberships that bring in and make the production available of our databases. And the database names that we have is eHRAF World Cultures. So this is the one that has information on living cultures that have not been extinguished yet, I guess, or extinct. And the other is archaeology. And the two databases have two major components which are very important to understand. So one component is a cultural aspect. Here it's listed as culture covered, and a topical aspect. And instead of talking about it theoretically, I'm going to jump right into the database and we'll get started with a search, and as we go about it, I will give you some more information. And so here we are. I just linked to eHRAF World Cultures, and the first thing you'll see is a default, an entry page with a big box that looks like almost like a Google type box. And let's say you want to do a search on food. Let's say we're looking for cultures in North America, or Native American cultures that eat mostly venison. So Native Americans who eat venison. Venison is deer. Okay, let's see. And one thing I already did wrong is I should have put in North Americans, because I also get Middle America. Okay, what are my results? Okay, I got 18 paragraphs in 11 documents in 7 cultures. And I click on the links that are provided. And here I will see a bunch of names and hits. And I click on them, and I see, for example, the Hopi name, and there is a reference to venison. And at this point, I'm a little bit disappointed because I'm supposed to do a paper. And with one paragraph, this is going to be mighty difficult to do. So this is not a bad search that we did. It's just that in order to really optimize the database, you do have to understand how it's structured, because only if you know its kind of native environment can you then determine your search to really get the most out of it. And by that, we need to visit where the structure is reflected. And so you follow me, and we'll click on Browse Cultures. So this is an entry where you would go through to get familiar with the database. And here I have to talk a little bit about the history. So our information that we include in the eHRAF World Cultures database is about cultures in major areas from around the world. Well, what does it mean? That means that we, and, oh, before I continue on, it's a sample, a representative sample of the world cultures. Well, my next question would be, how many cultures in the world even are there? 200, 300? Well, there are about 2,000. And we have right now 301 cultures in the database. And how does a culture make its way into the database? By random selection, because we try to give each and every culture the same chance of being selected. Now, the entry is A through C index. So here, just for quick reference, you will see various different names for a particular culture. And I think the closest example that would come to North America would be, for example, the Acadians, which are also called the Cajuns. So if I scroll down here, and or I type in a name like Acadians, and I don't find anything, so I have to try something else, Akan, and I think its spell was a C. So here you already have somewhat of a problem going on, that it's not like a Google that is so helpful that it says, well, did you mean X, Y, and Z? So you kind of have to have a little bit of a sense as to what wording you're using. But this is a good example of where you have a culture name, Acadians of Louisiana, and then the reference is to a bigger culture name called the Cajuns. So once you leave this menu, the only reference to Acadians will be as Cajuns. And so keep that in mind, that we do have one kind of popular name that we always use. Now, one way to explore the database is by country. So here I have all the various ethnic groups for Afghanistan. And you will see culture names that are really not so much nations, but minority groups or indigenous people or ethnic groups or tribal cultures of that particular region. So very rarely will you see a country name like Afghanistan, and then as the particular culture, that culture name would be Afghans. So just keep that in mind. Now, for example, if you were interested in Native American cultures of North America or in the United States specifically, you could come here, click on You, or type it in, and there you will see a list of all the cultures that we have currently included. Not only Native Americans, but also immigrant cultures, for example, Puerto Ricans or Haitian, no, not Hawaiians, but Italian Americans. I have to drink something because I'm having a cough. So now this window can be kind of sorted by going through another menu. And this is the menu that I actually recommend that you use to get familiar with our structure. Because going back to the 1930s, when this concept or structure was developed, and this was done by a Yale cultural anthropologist by the name of George Peter Murdoch, he came up with a clever idea to divide all this information. And I think he was already kind of having this concept that maybe Google will come around, and in the end there has to be some kind of a systematic way of finding information. And if you have a whole bunch of information, millions of pages, or thousands of pages, it's much better not to bring everything up to the surface at once, because heck, you couldn't read it all at once anyway, but to systematically divide it up by regions. So in our database, wherever you're going to in the text, you always have to go through a region door, and here are all the major regions, 8 of them. And only then can you drill down to the various subregions, and then only can you drill down to the various culture names. So let's say we are here interested in North America, and we are particularly interested in Native North Americans. So there is one tab that kind of disqualifies just by default, because if I click on it, I see only immigrant groups. So I then would only concentrate on cultures, of my liking. Like my favorite place to always go to is the Plains and Plateau, because I got my degree from the University of Wyoming, which is High Plains. It's in that region. So I have a personal interest of why I always come here. So here you have various culture names. And by the way, if you have questions, feel free to ask, because I like it to be interactive. And if you don't understand something, please just let me know. So whenever you see a culture name, so here you see Blackfoot. If I would have been in the A through C index coming in, I would have seen maybe reference of the blood to Blackfoot or Blackfeet as an ethnonym, or Pikuni is another one. But what is always helpful is that each culture name has a tag, an ID, an alphanumeric number, NF06 in this case. And I'm not gonna burden you with historical information, but all these have rhyme and reasons. In our system, N stands for North America, and then F, I don't know what that is, I think Plains, and then 06 is the actual number for that culture. So that's just on the side. But more importantly, and this is something that I find very helpful, is that each and every culture name has kind of an overview called the culture summary. So here, again, you see the various culture names. And this, think about your paper as you're writing it, because you may want to just, impress your professor a little bit with, I don't know, putting in a few ethnonyms. The Blackfoot, also called the Blood, or the Siksika. I don't know, I'm just giving you some hints. Here is some information where the culture is located, and this is all in reference to the stuff that is going on in this menu, which is what we call collection documents. And that is simply a list of all the various ethnographic materials that we have collected for that particular culture once we had chosen it. So going back to my colleagues here, like Tef would be collecting all these. No, it was Trish who is collecting all this information, but then it's Tef who is given all these materials by Trish, who says, okay, now deal with it. And so what Tef is doing is he has to look at each and every culture document or document and has to analyze it. So before we go into what I mean by it, let me give you a criteria as to what we use in order to include a document. So here I see a title that says Ethnobotany of the Blackfoot Indians. If the title would read now, Ethnobotany of Indians in North America, of the Plains region, we would not include it. because unless it's specifically about the Blackfoot, then it disqualifies. So let's click on a document I really like. And it's interesting because the title by itself is kind of vague. The Ways of My Grandmother. What is that about? The author, well, doesn't Hungry Wolf Beverly kind of sounds Native American. So let me click on it. Each document, in my document, I mean, it could be a book, a journal article, dissertation, monograph, has something what's called publication information. And publication information has the usual standard entry, what we call metadata, that is determined by the Library of Congress, for example, the author title, and then the title of the document, who publishes, byline, whatever that means, and then HRAF publication. So that's kind of standard here, this upper part right there. But now what we bring in, specifically my colleagues, is that we ask ourselves, well, what is this about, this title? And we determine, and this is where we bring in experts who know about the cultures more than we do, because what we do is just analyze it. We are not knowledgeable in each and every culture. We wish we were, but we are not. So we do get help from those who know, but what we add is that that we classify the document by a culture name. In this case, it's the Blackfoot. And if you click on it now, you will see a link to a little bit of a definition, and you see these ethnonyms popping up again. So this is another view, or even more expanded view of what you had seen in culture, in the culture summary. So those are all the various ethnonyms for that particular culture name, in this case the Blackfoot. And then we also tag the document by kind of the major components. So what's the storyline? And are you still here? Because I just heard a click.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we're still here.
Okay. So if I were to put my hand over this abstract, which kind of gives me an indication of what the document is about, I could just use these subjects here up on top to get an idea of what it is about. So here you have something going on about mythology in this whole document, about gender status, division of labor, and so forth. And then we also write an abstract, and then there's more, data included. And again, I'm giving you some tips as to what you want to include in your paper. So you could put in that, okay, eating practices by the Blackfoot. I looked at the Hungry Wolf document, she is an indigent, which is one of the evaluations that we use. Another evaluation key would be maybe an ethnologist or ethnographer. Someone who's just a traveler is usually not so knowledgeable with the culture. So we try to really use someone who, well, hopefully speaks the language. And then where the heck is going on? So here, coverage place is a good criteria, because you kind of want to let the person know that it's in the highlands, or in the forest, in the mountainous areas, you find different food items than down by the riverside or whatever. So keep that in mind. So place, time, and who does it. Now, navigation, table of contents. So up here is the author name again, the title, and this is where you can link to the various places in the text. So here, if you just go through the table of contents, you see that there's quite a bit of stuff going on here. And lo and behold, there's even some information about your class, preparing food items. So let's start up here. If I click up here, this takes me to the first place. And here, Hungry Wolf Beverly is introducing her grandmothers. And she is actually someone who just passed away recently. And I heard about it when I went to the anthropology conference. And her, who she's writing about in this monograph is about people of her tribe, who she calls her grandmothers. Of course, you know, you don't have 5 grandmothers necessarily, but this is what she's doing here. And on the right-hand side, and this is where the uniqueness of eHRAF comes in, is that my colleagues, Tef, you know, and the others read through these texts and painstakingly, not with a robo, you know, automatic word count, but painstakingly read each and every paragraph and tag each paragraph with subjects. So these are the subjects, and the subjects are based on the outline of culture materials, which also were founded in the 1930s. Actually, they go back to the 1860s, I believe. That was the first mentioning, not of the OCM, but of the contact of this concept. And so as you're going through and jumping to the various places in the text and go to the various pages, the subjects will change depending on what the contents of the paragraph is. And so here, let's go down to the recipe, because we'll come back to it. So here you have things going on about preparing food. And this will kind of already give you a preview of what you may want to use for your search. Food preparation, for example, drying food, we call food preservation. And where can I get my tools to make a super duper search? So we'll click over to advanced search. And here, the most important thing to remember is keep things simple. And I know it's hard because we are in an age where everything is typed. I don't know why, because it's actually pretty, I think, stressful to always type all the time. But what's better for our application is using the tools that we have available, meaning the pull-down buttons. So if I wanted to search for, let's say, well, for venison in North America used by Native Americans, what you would do is you would go through the pull-down menu, choose the region of your liking, North America, select all, and you do have to practice critical thinking here. So if I see here all these ethnic cultures and groups, and I don't want them, you have to make them go away by deselecting them. So if you want to search for something, you have to really basically be in the driver's seat and make the decisions yourself. So here it shows me that 50 cultures were selected, and now I have choices. So I can add subjects, but let's start out with a keyword search, because I think we'll work backwards a little bit, and I'll show you different angles and avenues to come about. So now, well, the critical thinking is that food have, depending on whether you're looking for cooked food or you know, an animal that is being eaten, you have to kind of use that word choice accordingly. So venison can also be, well, a deer meat, right? So you could do deer meat. And if you put a phrase in, you have to put it in quotation. And let's just run a search, because this is a very straightforward kind of a, very systematic search. And I already wonder whether this is a good search that I just did, because I'm getting way too many hits. Okay, no, it works. Okay, so it came up with just that particular phrase. And if you go back, this is just giving you a number count. And the reason why this is important to know about, just to know about and be aware of, is that if your search has a very specific meaning, that it's always, you're only interested in venison and only one culture, it's kind of good to keep it simple in terms of trying keywords like venison, and then do your search and just kind of get the count and see how I'm always going through my region first, and only then do I go to a sub-region. And the criteria that I always like to use is getting familiar what culture names are for a particular sub-region. So for example, here, if I click on Blackfoot, I will see 2 results. And if I click and I like what I see, I click on Show Paragraph, and I kind of compare this to a like a piece of a puzzle that I put on a table and it's dangling in cyberspace. And to put this piece of the puzzle back in context of a page, I have to click on View Page. So now I'm in the author title, Lancaster Richard Pegan, A Look from Within Life. And there is my paragraph. But on the right-hand side, there is really no mentioning to, to necessarily eating the meat or preparing it. So now if I want to find the food preparation or diet practices for a particular Native American group, then I have to go about it in another way. So if possible, I can translate or match my subject, whatever it is, with one of the existing categories, the OCM, based on the outline of culture materials. From this menu, I'm better off in getting something out of the database. So here, I'm lucky because food is actually its own category. So you drill down and you look at the various possibilities. Food consumption is listed here. So if you are looking for diet or eating or even food processing, you can click the subject as you like them. So here I have selected 3. And again, anytime I click on the number, the 3-digit number, and by the way, it's not a count as to how many hits I'm getting. It's just a simple ID number. Because as this title may change throughout time, because next year we might call it preparation of food, this is staying the same. So this is just a ID number. And in order to close it, you have to close it like this. And let's see here. Let's add subjects. So now I have 50 cultures selected and 3 topics: food preparation, diet, and eating. So when you have several of similar topics, you want to use an or, because one subject has to be found at the paragraph level, and paragraph level is a very small text environment, and I'll come back to that. Or diet or eating. If I would do and, all of these would have to be in one and the same paragraph, and this is very, very hard to fulfill. So or is always the best choice. Then search. So now instead of looking for keywords, we're now just looking for the subject, and this is really retrieving a lot more. And this might look very scary, having all the various paragraphs, but it's actually not, because we're not talking about pages. We're talking about paragraphs, places of, a few sentences at a time. So now I'm going back to what I had looked or introduced you to before. Remember when we were in here, we had looked at the Blackfoot file, and we saw that the Blackfoot documents are made up of 35 documents. So this is the totality, and they're all listed here. And in this window, we have searched all those 35 documents and came up with 24. So only 24 out of the total come up with information on diet or eating or food preparation. So when you have a lot of paragraphs to go through, you have a few tools that help you to kind of make it a little easier. So now I've changed this from, instead of 10 or whatever, 20, I can go 50 by 50. So now going back to the document that we had looked at before, you can go various ways. You can go straight down like this, or you can kind of jump around on the left-hand side. Either way, regardless, it will get a little bit getting used to. So there's just a learning curve of something unfamiliar, which may look a little scary in the beginning, but you only have so many options, so you will always get back to finding your place. So here, just by clicking on Hungry Wolf, I started to be placed in the beginning of where the hits are. So this is the title, and again, to show you the comparison, here is Hungry Wolf and the ways of my grandmother, coming in from a totally different way, not knowing where the paragraphs are about information on food or eating and diet. But here, using the subjects and the indexing system, it will hopefully lead me to some good information. And so you can start out, with the first paragraph opening up, and you are the one who has the critical thinking cap on. You're the investigator. You're the researcher who has to practice prudent decision making as to, okay, is this information useful to my study or not? Okay, so you read through it, and oftentimes there will only be a little snippet of information. So it's never gonna be like pages after pages talking about how the Blackfeet grandmothers cooked over open fire. So there it is, okay. So cooking was going on outside, open fire. I mean, or out in a big room, I guess. And so if you're intrigued, then you can switch over. So you can either click Show Page, and this will take you to the paragraph, and navigating around, you go back and forth. So you go to Paragraph Results, which is up here. So now I'm back in the entry menu, and unfortunately, when you go back, you do lose your place, which is not so great because, you know, you have to do that extra run. So here we go, and so you can go through here just clicking on the snippet. Open fire. Okay, this is getting interesting because now my grandmother and I lived on wild foods. Okay, ooh, and then they picked wild berries. Ooh, and they made cakes. That sounds so. Right there, you can start thinking about, maybe this is some really cool dishes that I can find out about, and always referencing, you know, as to take what you see over here, food preparation, and then what you see in the paragraph hopefully is about what is being used. So think about the tools being used for preparing food. So keep those subject in mind as kind of your, you know, stimulation for ideas. Okay, now let me talk more about the ways you can use the subjects here and tools that can also help you. So we have focused in on the major subject. You can also use an index system. Although, again, it's a little bit like the browse cultures. It's a little bit iffy as to what you type in. And if you try too many times, I know from my own experience, I get frustrated. I want to just know what the heck, how much is there available. So here, the tab that says OCM identifier is actually the structure that shows each and every of the subjects that we have once and only once. And although the format looks a little bit, you know, not necessarily intuitive, although it is, because here you see a sequence of the 100 comes before 110, and as I'm going through, I will come across subjects that I may want to consider that are not necessarily in the categories that are obvious. And the emphasis is on what's obvious, and to go that step further to see where else you can maybe find cool categories to use. So here are the various food categories. They're in the 200 range listed, even something about drinks. And so I really highly recommend that you go and just browse through what's here. Now, having said that all, I'm going to give you a little tip and a place where you can go to get a sense of everything that we have available in terms of the categories. So now I'm going to switch back to our home page. So here we are outside the interface, and if you click on our link, eHRAF databases, you can click on the eHRAF World Cultures database, and if you click on topics covered, you can do a little bit of a pre-pepping, and if you go down this list, you, in an overview, get a sense of all the various categories that are included that you can use in your search. So what I usually do is I use this as my reconnaissance window or menu, and I go down and I just gather information of what are the OCM subject that I want to even, you know, use. So here I look, and this opens up each and every description. And the descriptions are kind of important to know because they help you make a decision as to, okay, I'm going to search for OCM 251, preservation and food storage, and storage of food. And at this point, I do use my pencil and I write it down. I don't write down the whole title because I'm too lazy, but I write down the number because I will show you where else you can mark it up if you like. So here I say, okay, I like 252. Sounds like a good one. And then, you know, meat packing, not so much, but diet. Well, so I have about 3 now. And let's add one more. Eating, 265. No, 264. Okay, so now with this in mind, and just for kicks, I look further to see what else there is, because you never know what you come across that you might find somewhat interesting. So I look and look, because I might also take another anthropology class, so it's always good to know, right? Okay, and I in my case, I like kind of this mythology thing. So mythology is striking my fancy, so I'm going to write that down again, not the whole title. And then there's one that I find really intriguing. Taboo. Okay, practices on taboo. Okay, so my mind is working here. And I then go, whoops, sorry, let me go up again. And a very useful tool, sorry about racing around, I hope, is up on top. There is a link to the PDF file. And the PDF file has about 12 pages. And now you can, with those numbers you had written down, you can just go in and kind of mark them in sequence. So I would be marking, you know, all those 2 categories because I had looked at the description, so I know I want them. And then I set them aside because now in the database, going back to do my search, I can fairly quickly put together, hopefully, an awesome search. We'll see. So let's go back in again and let's use the various additional categories to make them a total of 4. So we go to the 200 category, click on food preparation, storage, and then we have diet, eating. So we have those. And then add the subject. And then we can add, if we like, another layer or component. So here are my like categories. And then we can add something kind of totally different. So I had come across one that I thought was maybe something cool to investigate. The taboo of eating or diet. And I click on it and I don't, okay, so here I see it. And I open it up and read it again. And I say, this is kind of, it's looking good. So with this in mind, I can launch yet another search. And in this case, only those text places will appear where both, not just the food category, but also the taboo category will be present. And hopefully, and not always, will there be a reference where the two intersect, that it is about like a food taboo. So let's look here. Okay, so here, and okay. So this is interesting because although there is information about pregnancy, it's also about food. So this is, a woman is not supposed to eat innards like the heart and things like that. And then there's more down here. So now I'm so intrigued that I'm going to click on show page because I want to know when this practice is going on, because I don't know whether it's happening yesterday or in the last decade that this taboo is going on, or whether it goes back to kind of former times. And this is why it's important to look over here to the page focus. Unfortunately, this is not a good example because it says field date, non-date coverage. So you do, in effect, then have to go to the publication info page, which is always here. So here you will get a sense of when this was published. This information you will also find, by the way, and let me show you some search tips. So if I go and navigate from one page to the other, I have to change this button here, and then I can click the box to select it, and this tells me that there's only one result. So, but in terms of now processing, I can click on print or email, and this will bring up the text and the title and the published by. So I know it was published 1980s, critical thinking. Well, there wouldn't be anything in that has been going on in 2010 because it was published in 1980. And I can add metadata links like publication info. See how it's adding subject, abstract, field date, and coverage place, and Library of Congress subject heading, as you like. And toggling, this is taking me back. And if you click on here, you will go back to the database results. So here, this is a good example of a search with just the two OCM subjects. But you can also experiment. So oftentimes, I try something else. I try maybe a keyword. And when you use a keyword, separation, when you have several, I simply separate it by a space. And if you have a singular and a plural, meaning one taboo, many taboos, by all means, put in an asterisk. But be careful, because depending on the word you're using, you might get something totally different out. So now let's search for diet and taboo. And this is where my subject now becomes a filter for that word. And again, this is just practice for you to kind of get familiar, to feel comfortable with it. So the subject here filters that word to get me to this place in text. So if I were to change the category, now, for example, if I were to use taboo and burial practices, I would not probably come across texts that have to do with food. You never know. So just keep that in mind. So at this point, do you have any questions?
Anybody?
No?
I don't see any hands.
Yeah. Oh. So it's kind of, see it as a treasure trove. There are some limitations. And the big limitation that I like you to keep in mind is when something was published. And again, going to the browse menu and maybe even having it open when you first circle in on a particular culture name is actually super important, because based on the publication dates that you see on the right-hand side, right away you kind of get a sense as to what the time coverage is. So here, again, critical thinking. I know that there is absolutely nothing past 1999. So if you want to get to information that was taking place yesterday, I mean, not yesterday, but in the last decade, then, you know, this would not fulfill your criteria. But that doesn't mean that these practices don't go on anymore. And this is kind of the big unknown where you want to reach out to maybe other resources, but keep in mind, you know, do these taboos still go on? Do people still eat venison or not? Or do they only eat McDonald's food? I don't know, you know, but it's for you to find out. But to get a sense of the quantity as what you're researching is another link that is kind of important to know about, which is called the collection description. And each collection description, you will see an overview. Where are these people located? And then the collection information, because each culture's collected documents not only have a total number, in this case for the Blackfoot is 35, but also the number of pages. In this case, nearly 6,000 pages that you can research. So a little bit depending on how much info you find depends on which culture you choose to be, you know, getting to know. So the best recourse is really to maybe do a preliminary, you know, advanced search for the topics, for the diets, and then based on the various number of paragraphs that you see here listed here is to explore the culture before you even look at what's in it. So both parts, get familiar with the culture through here in the browse. So for example, here I had clicked on North America and the Navajo, and then also go through here to see whether you can find the link to that culture by going to browse to learn more about them. Like for example, Southwest, I see here Hopi and Navajo. Okay, so again, the culture summary. But if you click on collection document, all of a sudden, instead of seeing 35 documents, boy, you're gonna have to go through 251 documents. So the quantity here is more for one culture than for another. So just keep that in mind. And again, you can put that into your assignment. And another place that is good to know, which is on our homepage, is other than topics covered, is cultures covered. So here, this is under the eHRAF databases, eHRAF World Cultures, and then cultures covered. So this is the culture component and a list of all the various cultures we have included. And there are related links. So the PDF file with those 12 pages is linked from here. And there's even an Excel file. So that is something that is kind of, I find it super cool because I put it together. So I'm giving myself a little praise because it's evening time. But the reason why it is important is because it gives you an overview of the various regions that we have included, so you can sort and modify this as you like, but also kind of get a sense of the number of pages that you would find. And if you have an Excel, you know, familiarity, you can do a search by date coverage, and this will give you an idea as to, you know, like the Navajo, what time period it covers. So just keep that in mind to know about. Well, there's also help available that is online. So if you go to basic search, and if you click on the right-hand side, you can link to our resource center. So there is a link to something called Getting Started that will take you to the user guide, which we're currently reworking. And there you can go to the various places like advanced search. There will be a link to search tips, for example, what to do when you do have keywords or truncation, you know, what you look out for. And then the OR, Boolean OR, and cautions. And then there should be also a, let's see, on the right-hand side, search methodology and examples. I'm a visual learner, so I need a lot of similar examples or different examples for me to absorb it. I'm horrible with just reading text. I have to see a lot of images for me to get to understand. So this is why we here have put together just a few search example, and if you click on it, you will kind of see the images and, you know, what to do and the steps you take. So this is basically kind of a visual guide to help you what I have just explained, circles and, you know, going through the various motions here. And well, going back to the database, it's a lot to cover. Oh, I want to show you what I did after I came across, and I'm going to go back to our homepage because I did a show and tell too. I went and I searched, and let me show you the search that I did. So I'm going to go to, let's see here. Here we are. Okay, I want to be in the right environment. So I looked, since I always wanted to do something like a hands-on search and come across and do a recipe, a food recipe. I searched for recipes. So I went to advanced search and I kicked out everything here and I selected cultures, particularly in North America. So I did a select all. Okay, and then I just typed in recipe. I looked what I could find. Okay, so this is just a word search again. And I went and I looked up the Blackfoot. And okay, so I found just references to keywords, but then when I did click on the page, and when I did navigate through the body and I went down, I came across something I really, really wanted to bake, which is a berry upside down cake. And here you see the various ingredients actually. And there's the venison Swiss steak. Yummy. And then what I did is, and this was back in, boy, let me get out of here so we don't get confused here. Back in Thanksgiving, I baked a Thanksgiving cake, and let me look for it. I titled it Blackfoot. Okay, and I followed that recipe from here. The only problem I made, and I have to admit I'm not a cook or a baker, sadly, although I should know it by now because I'm not the youngest anymore. I doubled my recipe, and it took forever for the dough to rise. It was like 2 hours. And I was so desperate that I ended up calling my colleague who is a foodie, a gourmet cook, and asked her, I'm like, how can I get this berry upside down cake to actually rise? And she's like, well, you have to do X, Y, and Z. But it ended up tasting actually pretty good. And there it is. There's the berry upside down cake. And here we're all tasting it. And there's the page that you see, that you see now, you see right here. So anyway, so that's the demo. If you have questions, now is the time to ask. I can also do a sample search for you if you like.
Do you want to see a sample?
I mean, you have to tell me what you want me to research.
Think of
like it could be insects or like well, I mean, and this is where you want to maybe take things further too. Like we started out with the venison. So you could take it a step further and say, okay, venison, what is the association with deer and venison in the Blackfoot culture? So you can kind of turn it to something else. Like a venison is a deer, right? I guess. Deer. And then you can associate it with a totally different subject. Like if we now only concentrate on the Blackfoot, let's say we've circled in on that, so clear all, and it would only be the Blackfoot. And boy, where are they? They were on this B, right? I could just search for either the keyword, and if I don't want to see all these paragraphs, then I can go and make it even more refined. Like, how about deer and mythology? So again, I would use my other tools that I had shown you, and with those in mind, and now I'm gonna go a little quicker, I would then just go down and click like mythology, animism. Heck, all of them kind of sound good, right? Religious beliefs in deer. And I could even try, I mean, it's not going to hurt to put in something about diet. I mean, not necessarily is there going to be a connection, but this is supposed to be an experiment, right? I mean, you're there to learn. And then I would see and take my foodie categories, food processing, and I would select them all, because if you are doing what's called a Boolean search, so this is a classic example of a Boolean search where you have many different categories. This is the Boolean operator OR. Keep in mind, critical thinking and library information system. Boolean is spelled B-O-O-L-E-A-N. I think it's a person name. And then the layer, when you add something more, you want to use AND, because you're searching for paragraphs that have to contain one or a few of these components and one or a few of these components. And together, it will merge your search into just a few. So here, not much is happening. There's not much going on in the Blackfoot and, you know, religious beliefs and deer and religion, but you never know. So here you go to show paragraph, but the methodology is pretty straightforward. So you have one component, another, and you can then add it or just do a surprise, you know, like you would see on Google, get lucky, or what is it called? I feel lucky. Not get lucky. Well, I mean, feel lucky, and just be surprised. You know, don't have any preconceived notion, but just come in and kind of see what it will spit out. And okay, dried tongue is a meal of communion during medicine lord ceremony. That's pretty awesome, kind of. I mean, yeah. Tongues in symbol of, so I would have come across this on its own too. So if I would have just searched for diet or preservation and food storage, I would have come across the same paragraph. But what it will give you as a little hint as you're writing your paper, because now you can see and use these tools and say, oh, okay, tongue was used in organized ceremonials, OCM 796. and so, you know, use it as a crutch that you can conveniently use right there. But nonetheless, you have to plow through it and really decide yourself as to, is this relevant to my research or not? You know, and that's why you're taking this class. So,
Good. Thank you, Chris. Are there any thoughts, questions? Right. Well, we'll let you know how it goes.
Okay, that sounds good.
Appreciate the time, Chris.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for letting me show you the eHRAF database. And if you have questions, feel free to contact me, and I'd be happy to, you know, explain the different portions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Bye-bye.
Bye.